Imagine waking up to what seems like a completely normal day. The sun is rising, people are driving to work, airplanes are crossing the sky, and life feels exactly the same as yesterday. Then, in a single instant, something impossible happens. Earth suddenly stops spinning. The planet is no longer rotating, but everything on its surface is still moving. At the equator, Earth spins at about 1,670 kilometers per hour, or over 1,000 miles per hour. Even though the ground stops, everything above it keeps moving at that incredible speed because of inertia. People would not simply fall over. They would be thrown across the ground faster than a passenger jet. Cars would become uncontrollable almost instantly. Buildings would begin to collapse as millions of objects slammed into them. Trees would snap like matchsticks. Power lines would tear apart, and anything not firmly attached to the ground would become a deadly projectile. The destruction would happen in seconds. Airplanes would face an even greater disaster. They are already moving through the atmosphere, but now the ground beneath them has suddenly stopped while the air continues moving. Pilots would have almost no chance to react. Many aircraft would lose control or crash as violent winds formed across the planet. But the atmosphere wouldn't stop spinning immediately. The air would continue racing around Earth at nearly the same speed the planet had been rotating. This would create the strongest winds our world has ever experienced. These winds could travel faster than the speed of sound. Entire cities would disappear beneath walls of dust, rock, broken glass, and pieces of buildings carried through the air like giant bullets. Forests would be flattened within minutes. Skyscrapers would be stripped apart floor by floor. Bridges would twist and collapse under forces they were never designed to withstand. Even mountains would not completely protect the landscape. Powerful shockwaves and hurricane-force winds would sweep through valleys, carrying debris for hundreds of kilometers. If you were standing outside, survival would be almost impossible. Even inside a strong building, flying debris could destroy windows and walls within moments. Near the oceans, the situation would become even more terrifying. The water covering Earth's surface is also moving with the planet. When the ground suddenly stops, the oceans keep moving. This creates enormous waves unlike anything in recorded history. These would not be ordinary tsunamis caused by earthquakes. Instead, entire oceans would surge across continents. Coastal cities would disappear beneath massive walls of water. Ships would be thrown far inland. Ports, beaches, islands, and entire coastlines would be erased within hours. At first, people might think the worst is over. But the real disaster is only beginning. Because stopping Earth's rotation doesn't just affect people, buildings, or oceans. It changes the entire planet. The first hours after Earth stopped spinning would be only the beginning. The initial destruction would leave behind a planet that no longer looks anything like the world we know today. But one of the biggest changes would come from something we rarely think about: gravity. Not because gravity itself would disappear, but because Earth's rotation currently affects how much we weigh. Right now, the spinning of our planet creates a small outward force that slightly reduces the pull of gravity, especially near the equator. If Earth stopped rotating, this effect would vanish. People would become slightly heavier. The difference would not be enough to notice immediately, but over time it would change the way oceans, air, and even the shape of Earth itself behave. For billions of years, Earth's rotation has shaped the planet. The oceans are not perfectly distributed. The planet is slightly wider at the equator because spinning pushes material outward. But if rotation stopped, Earth would slowly begin changing shape. Over thousands of years, water would start moving away from the equator and toward the poles. The oceans would no longer stay where they are today. Massive new seas would form near the North and South poles. Meanwhile, areas around the equator would slowly become much drier. Countries located near the equator could eventually transform into enormous desert regions. But the biggest change would come from the sky. A day would no longer last 24 hours. It would become one extremely long cycle of sunlight and darkness. One side of Earth would face the sun for about 6 months. The other side would experience darkness for about 6 months. The temperature differences would become extreme. The side facing the sun would heat up for months without a normal night to cool down. Oceans would begin evaporating. Massive clouds would form. Storm systems unlike anything on Earth today would cover the planet. Meanwhile, the dark side of Earth would become a frozen wasteland. Temperatures would drop far below freezing. The atmosphere would begin changing as gases froze and moved toward colder regions. Life on Earth would face a completely new challenge. Plants would struggle because they depend on regular sunlight cycles. Many ecosystems would collapse. Animals that rely on seasonal patterns, migration, and normal temperatures would lose the conditions they evolved for. Human civilization would also face impossible problems. Agriculture would become one of the greatest challenges. Most crops are designed for a planet with regular days and nights. Growing food would require massive underground farms or artificial environments protected from extreme temperatures. Cities would need to adapt. People would likely move toward regions with more stable conditions, possibly near the borders between the permanent day and permanent night sides. These areas would experience a constant twilight, not complete darkness, not endless sunlight, but a narrow zone where temperatures might remain more manageable. However, there is another hidden danger. Earth's magnetic field,